Fake, exclaimed the spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with unwavering conviction, brushing off allegations that Israel had drawn up a daring plan to eliminate Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But was it truly all smoke and mirrors? Allegations came thick and fast, stirring a tempest in Washington's power corridors. President Donald Trump, larger than life, no stranger to bombastic headlines, was said to have vetoed the move personally. For anyone who thought Middle East tensions had already reached boiling point, this rumor hammered home a single truth. The region's fragile stability could unravel at any moment. So, what really went down behind closed doors? We are talking about the rumored proposal, quietly passed from Israeli officials to the White House, that supposedly sought the swift removal of Iran's foremost authority. The plan, if believed, was no fleeting fancy. It purportedly had intel, timing, and looming risk calculations behind it. Yet according to a United States official familiar with the sensitive briefing, the president had waved it away, concerned that this single strike might ignite an uncontainable firestorm in an already volatile Middle East. One direct blow at the core of Iran, some reasoned, could tip the scales of conflict toward full-blown chaos. This is our central question. Did the top echelons in Jerusalem truly concoct such a focused plan? And if so, why did they trust that President Trump would greenlight what might have been viewed as one of the boldest covert actions in modern times? Today we delve into these swirling questions and explore how this story intertwines with diplomatic friction, rhetorical saber-rattling, and the intense psychology of a Middle Eastern theater, always on the brink. In this episode, we will pry into every aspect: how the alleged assassination scheme emerged, whether it was indeed as extensively orchestrated as rumored, and who might have aimed to fan the flames of public outrage by leaking the story. We will also examine Trump's perspective. This leader who, on one hand, promised to end seemingly endless foreign entanglements, while on the other hand, boasted of an outsized influence over peace negotiations, no matter how explosive. And just for good measure, we will see how Netanyahu's own rhetoric and political motives mesh with the swirling controversies of American domestic hardliners. First off, let's go back just a short time ago to the Washington decision-making sphere. Word spread that Israeli leadership had traveled with a proposition that, on the face of it, might stop Iran's nuclear ambitions in their tracks. The target was not just weapon sites. It was not even symbolic infrastructures. It was the very figure who personifies Iran's Islamist establishment, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Of course, if scholars are to be trusted, overthrowing or assassinating a spiritual and political statesman in Iran would be no neat affair. The uproar in the Iranian capital, Tehran, would spark swift reprisals, possibly pulling the United States deeper into a conflagration it had repeatedly claimed it did not want. Anonymity cloaked the reported U.S. official who disclosed that the White House, having evaluated the operation's blowback, decided to shut it down before it gained any momentum. Some believe that the Trump administration, with re-election under its belt and fresh ambitions to maintain a strong global stance, was torn between its hawkish support of Israel and its reluctance to spark a war with unpredictable consequences. The idea of eliminating a powerful Iranian leader could excite certain factions, but also escalate the region's tensions beyond control. Publicly, Netanyahu's camp denied the entire thing, remarking that the notion of a plan to kill Khamenei was unadulterated fiction. Observers, nonetheless, have been quick to note the dissonance between Netanyahu's official statements and the behind-the-scenes environment. On one hand, Netanyahu gave a public statement that Israel would do what needed to be done, implying that Israeli defense strategies would not be dictated by external influences. On the other, the White House's frustration with precipitous military engagement suggests that if Israel intended to take this route, it would not be with the backing of Washington. Meanwhile, Trump himself seemed to walk a tightrope, balancing his loyalty to Israel, a relationship shaped by decades of U.S.-Israeli security partnership, with his repeated vow not to embroil the United States in further dangers abroad. If the plan truly lay on his desk, one can only imagine the level of tension swirling within his inner circle. He allegedly saw catastrophic potential for an all-out war that, once triggered, might be impossible to rein in. That is, perhaps, the reason he swiftly claimed in interviews that he wanted to avoid further escalations, even as he threatened unimaginable force if Iran dared to lash out at U.S. bases or diplomatic sites. But what about the Iranian response? Tehran, suspicious of Washington's deep support for Israel, pinned blame on the United States at every turn. With both sides exchanging missile volleys in the region, shelling, according to local reports, that threatened to upend entire enclaves, the risk of miscalculations soared. Some Iranian leaders publicly accused the U.S. of providing the iron fist behind Israeli strikes, suggesting that if they were pushed too far, they would retaliate. The White House, by contrast, insisted it had no direct hand in any Israel-driven escalation, though that only fueled Iranian skepticism. If you are finding this deep dive riveting, please consider giving this video a like. It is a great way to let us know you are on board with unraveling these international dramas. Tensions soared in tandem with the rhetorical battles swirling among the president's strongest supporters. Republican figures, always vocal, lined up on both sides of the question: how far is too far? On one side stood the likes of Senator Rand Paul, praising Trump for apparent restraint and urging him not to venture into a new confrontation. On the other side, more hawkish Republicans like Lindsey Graham had a different perspective, suggesting that if diplomacy fails, demolishing Iran's nuclear infrastructure might be the only pragmatic solution. Meanwhile, populist activists close to Trump, such as the outspoken Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, hammered home the idea that the president's real appeal was in rejecting the warmongering of past administrations. That sets the scene for a deeper puzzle. Does the American public have the appetite for another conflict in the Middle East? Trump is no fool when it comes to reading his base. During his initial term in the Oval Office, he repeatedly emphasized America First principles, suggesting that expensive foreign entanglements cost domestic jobs and hemorrhaged resources that could be better invested at home. Nevertheless, Middle East geopolitics have a knack for pulling even the most reluctant leaders into complicated alliances and moral commitments. For Netanyahu, any chance to fully neutralize Iranian threats, especially by striking at the top of Iran's leadership, might have seemed irresistibly bold, yet how would such an ambitious plan even look in practice? Those who follow intelligence circles point out that assassinating a high-profile figure like the supreme leader would involve months, if not years, of planning. Assets would need to be positioned carefully, exit routes mapped, and the diplomatic ramifications weighed. Iran is no stranger to infiltration or sabotage attempts. In the past, it has accused foreign powers of orchestrating attacks on its nuclear scientists. With Khamenei, however, the stakes would be exponentially higher, likely sparking a new wave of proxy battles that could span multiple regions: Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and beyond. Some watchers suspect that the leaked story was meant to sow confusion, perhaps to condition global opinion. If the world believed that Israel had come close to neutralizing Khamenei, it might embolden Iranian hardliners to undertake even more aggressive measures, believing that their leader was in immediate danger. Or, contrarily, it might function as a psychological strategy to rattle Iranian officials, pressuring them to reconsider any high-stakes moves or escalations. In any event, the direct claim that Trump personally stopped the plan underscores the lingering question: how often do U.S. presidents weigh such lethal proposals? This kind of conflict is obviously not limited to Israel and Iran. Trump, never shy about broadcasting his diplomatic achievements, boasted that he single-handedly intervened in major international disputes, from India and Pakistan to the face-offs between Serbia and Kosovo. He repeatedly claimed credit for de-escalating tensions. In the case of India and Pakistan, where infiltration, the downing of drones, and cross-border firefights nearly drew the region's nuclear powers into open conflict, Trump insisted that his negotiations produced a ceasefire. Some Indian sources rejected that notion outright, accusing him of overstating the American role, but his supporters held firm. Such talk fed the narrative of Trump as the ultimate peacemaker in dangerous times. Now, with the swirling rumor that he turned down Israel's bold plan, we see the same pattern emerging again: a portrayal of Trump as a resolute leader who knows how to keep the peace but also is ready to unleash fearsome retribution if truly provoked. We heard him warning Iran in no uncertain terms: if U.S. assets were threatened, American firepower would descend on Tehran with a force the world has never witnessed. It is a precarious balancing act, melding threats with claims of benevolent arbitration. For a president often accused of fueling tension in global hotspots, the narrative that he personally shot down a high-risk assassination scheme will undoubtedly spark debate. Netanyahu's official responses, meanwhile, stuck to the broad lines. Israel will do what Israel must. The disclaimers from the Prime Minister's spokesperson that everything was fake brought an interesting dimension. After all, word of mouth in intelligence circles is rarely so black and white. The Prime Minister also publicly mused about regime change in Tehran, insinuating that the Iranian government stood on shaky ground. In the same breath, however, he carefully avoided confirming or denying whether an Israeli request had truly reached the White House. If anything, the denial might function as a strategic hedge, preserving plausible deniability. Within Iran, any rumor that foreign powers are scheming to topple or kill the country's top leader is guaranteed to galvanize nationalist fervor. Even those disenchanted with the government might feel a surge of defensive anger if they suspect outside nations are interfering. With ongoing missile exchanges, the Middle Eastern climate is already perilous. A potential decapitation strike would give Tehran justification to strike back with fury. Analysts fear that such retribution might not be fleeting, but part of a protracted confrontation. In the worst-case scenario, it could ignite multiple proxy fronts. It might empower extremist elements in Lebanon or Syria, with ballistic arsenals poised to strike Israeli cities. All of this begs the question: how well can we trust the official version of events? The Associated Press cited an unnamed U.S. official attesting to the plan's existence. Reuters reportedly carried the story of Trump's alleged veto, but such sources are precarious, as they are often limited by official secrecy. With Netanyahu and his circle calling it fake, and Trump carefully pivoting away from clarifying remarks, we are left to piece together a mosaic from statements and secondhand accounts. Still, the possibility alone is tantalizing. Does it represent just one more chapter in the unending saga of clandestine warfare between Israel and Iran? It is worth remembering that the relationships in this part of the world are rarely straightforward. One might see an open conflict in Syria, missile tests in the Persian Gulf, political tremors in Iraq, and diplomacy in Oman, all converging into a single swirling puzzle. Typically, American presidents assume the role of referee, constantly coaxing regional players to stand down. Yet the wider Republican base is torn. Does supporting Israel necessitate endorsing every measure it pushes forward? Or is it prudent to hold the reins and restrain an emboldened ally from going too far? The Trump doctrine, so to speak, is both supportive of Israel and self-protective of U.S. strategic interests. This swirling climate led Trump to lay out bold statements advising Iran against retaliation, while simultaneously hinting that some kind of deal was around the corner. Iran and Israel should make a deal and will make a deal, he prophesied, drawing parallels with his perceived successes in other diplomatic standoffs. Naturally, critics seized on those words, pointing out that every administration in recent memory has tried to broker Middle East peace, yet the region's fault lines endure. Then again, Trump's brand has always been about defying the odds. He touted the Abraham Accords in his earlier tenure as significant breakthroughs, though they primarily involved Arab states historically less entrenched in active hostilities against Israel. We might wonder, too, how domestic politics in the United States color the president's approach to the conflict. Various factions in Trump world push for different extremes. Some thrive on hawkishness, others back an isolationist slant, content to let regional disputes fester without direct American involvement. At the same time, nobody denies that a single missile hitting a U.S. base or embassy could shift public opinion dramatically, pressuring a president, any president, to respond with overwhelming force. Clearly, the Israel-Iran feud, if stoked, can quickly transform from a simmering standoff to a region-wide battle. If you want to see more in-depth coverage, consider subscribing so you will not miss future explorations. This arena is changing by the day. And just as this story roiled, the president had to pack his bags for the Group of Seven summit to be held in Canada. Leaders from Japan, Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and Canada, as well as the European Union, no doubt planned to probe him for clarity on the crisis. After all, any escalation in the Middle East can rattle oil markets, intensify refugee crises, and rouse extremist factions worldwide. Traditional American allies, especially in Western Europe, have balked at the idea of an explosive confrontation triggered by one or two major miscalculations. Behind the scenes, such summits often serve as an arena where exhausted officials desperately try to contain crises. For instance, at a time when the world's attention might have hovered on climate agreements or global economic ties, the conversation now hushes to revolve around missile attacks, assassination plots, and the dreaded possibility of an all-out war between Israel and Iran. Some wonder whether the White House's sudden pivot, Trump condemning retaliations while expressing confidence in a future treaty, indicates a plan to hammer out an undisclosed diplomatic solution. But nothing is certain. From the vantage point of Netanyahu, these swirling questions might also serve domestic political ends. A prime minister who stands firm against Iran's supreme leadership, threatening regime change and boasting of Israel's readiness to act, may rally certain constituents. In times of crisis, some voters rally behind strong leaders they believe will safeguard national security. Yet, if the rumored plan was indeed real, Netanyahu's denial might be a strategy to avoid backlash from the international community, mindful that openly targeting a foreign head of state is rarely embraced by the global order. However, some hawks in Israel would see it as a display of raw political courage. As for Iran, the official line remains that the United States is secretly pulling all the strings. Watching Trump's social media blasts, they might glean a reason to suspect that Washington, with its formidable arsenal, could step in more forcefully at any time. Iran's supporters, meanwhile, point to numerous instances in which the U.S. foreign policy apparatus changed course unexpectedly. They also worry that any hush-hush collaboration between Israel and the White House could strike far more devastating blows to their military and political apparatus. Their next move might hinge on whether they believe the U.S. is truly serious about forging a peaceful resolution. Philosophically, the notion of regime change has been a consistent undercurrent in American policy toward Iran. From the White House perspective, be it under different administrations, Iran's Islamic leadership is consistently seen as an obstacle to regional harmony, especially with allegations they back militant proxies in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. Iran, for its part, frames itself as a sovereign defender, pushing back against what it sees as Israeli aggression and American imperialism. The friction leaves the region perpetually 2 steps from heartbreak. When Netanyahu casually dropped the hint that the Iranian regime was standing on shaky ground, it reignited speculation. Might Israel see an opportunity to accelerate that process by some show of force? Or was it a mere rhetorical flourish, aimed at rattling Iranian authorities and fueling internal dissent? Observers recall that short bursts of protest sometimes spin into significant anti-government anger in Tehran, though the leadership there is adept at clamping down swiftly. One of the more intriguing twists to this entire story is the profoundly American dimension. How does a country that once positioned itself as an indispensable global policeman decide when to say no to a close ally's covert ambitions? Trump's original campaign promises hinged on not dragging the U.S. deeper into foreign wars. Yet he also famously withdrew from the Iran nuclear agreement, sending signals of confrontation that emboldened hawkish Israeli circles. The resulting dynamic was a roller coaster, pro-engagement, yet quick to wave a big stick if threatened, supportive of some Israeli actions, yet hesitant to cross the red line of initiating a head-of-state kill. Meanwhile, the rhetorical volley continues among Trump's loyal supporters. Tucker Carlson, the provocative media figure, championed the idea that taking America into fresh wars would betray the electorate that put Trump in office. Others, like Lindsey Graham, insisted that the only way to restrain Iranian nuclear ambitions is by demonstrating real, muscular deterrence. If that means flying missions with Israel, so be it. Inside the Republican Party itself, these competing visions jostle for dominance. As the G7 summit looms in the background, foreign leaders anxiously wait to see which side of Trump emerges, the dealmaker or the enforcer. All the while, everyday citizens in Israel and Iran can only watch with bated breath. They have lived through rocket alarms, funerals for fallen soldiers, and years of headlines declaring that a certain conflict is about to explode. Will this moment be any different? The region has endured waves of crises in which assassinations of key figures triggered chain reactions that lasted for years, both sides pointing fingers, certain that the moral high ground belonged exclusively to them. One can only imagine how a push to eliminate Khamenei would rank on this already dramatic scale. The truth is probably less sexy than the rumor. Governments do not simply toss around the idea of assassinating a supreme leader in casual conversation. However, the Middle East's complex alliances and power structures mean that if any plan, real or hypothetical, gets close to public awareness, it can generate unstoppable speculation. Every actor has a vested interest in spinning the story. Israel might hint that it is poised for anything. The U.S. might claim it swiftly vetoed such an operation to sustain global trust. Iran might shout about conspiracies in order to unify its base. For all we know, the mere discussion of this external threat might serve to quiet internal critics. But amidst all the noise, keep your eyes peeled for tangible actions on the ground. Irregular missile launches, midnight airstrikes, or coverage of suspicious drone sightings could be silent harbingers of bigger moves. If a line is crossed, retribution can be fierce, and the fragile equilibrium between these historic rivals could collapse in days. The White House may scramble to contain the damage, but controlling the responses of multiple factions, including militant groups scattered across several countries, is an unimaginable challenge. What remains certain is that today's rumor-laden fiasco underscores just how close the North American giant and the Middle Eastern powerhouse truly are. The relationship is perched on the abyss of both synergy and suspicion. Trump's brand of politics thrives on moments of tension and resolution. He might see a chance to walk onto the world stage as the figure who neutralized the worst impulses on all sides. Or he might find himself cornered by domestic hawks, insisting that only a maximal confrontation sends the right message. With Netanyahu's alleged plan swirling in the background, that balancing act becomes even more precarious. The Middle East has always been a crucible of paradoxes and impossible choices. Presidents come and go, prime ministers shift in and out of power, yet the fundamental puzzle of Israel, Iran, and the region's loyal proxies remains stubbornly unsolved. Will some future revelation confirm that such a brazen assassination plan really did land on Trump's desk? Or was it just a rumor inflated by conflicting interests? The only sure thing is that decision-makers walk a tightrope of their own, with each misstep having the potential to ripple across continents. In the meantime, you can bet that global media will continue dissecting the smallest shift, the slightest tweet, the boldest contradiction. Perhaps the mystery is half the spectacle. It holds our attention, fosters sensational headlines, and keeps the stakes fearfully high. Nonetheless, when lives hang in the balance, when entire nations might be pulled from uneasy calm into open war, we have to hope that cooler heads ultimately prevail. From Netanyahu's cryptic hints to Trump's pledges of swift vengeance, the final outcome could shape the Middle East for decades. Stay tuned, stay informed, and never underestimate how fast a rumor can become a flashpoint. The curtain has not fallen yet. We will see if any conclusive statements emerge that place this suspected plan in a definitive context, hoax or near reality, once the dust settles. Until then, the story of Trump vetoing an alleged Israeli request to kill Iran's supreme leader remains emblematic of the region's precarious balance, where the flick of one pen, the push of one button, or the nod of one leader could reshape the entire geopolitical landscape in the blink of an eye.